The glass shattered against the bar floor, and everyone turned to stare. Elena's hand was still trembling, not from throwing it, but from 50 years of swallowing rage finally erupting. The young captain's smirk hadn't wavered. "So what was your call sign, sweetheart, Cupcake?" She stood slowly, every muscle remembering the cockpit where she'd saved 19 Marines while her plane bled hydraulic fluid and enemy fire tore through her fuselage. Her voice cut through the silence like the roar of twin engines at full throttle. "They called me Iron Lady, and before this night ends, you'll learn exactly why grown men who've seen hell still wake up thanking God I answered their radio calls. Before we begin, please subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell, and watch this story until the very end. Comment below with your city so I can see how far this story travels around the world." Now let's continue. The Henderson Community Center smelled like burnt coffee and decades of broken promises. Elena Castellano had walked through its doors expecting a quiet evening, a veterans reunion, some handshakes, maybe a free dinner. What she hadn't expected was to feel like an intruder in her own story. "Ma'am, are you lost?" The voice belonged to a young man in dress blues, barely 25, his chest decorated with ribbons that spelled out deployments she could map in her sleep. "No," Elena said. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." He looked past her, scanning for someone more important. "The spouse's social is in the back room. This is for actual veterans." Something cold settled in Elena's chest. Not anger, not yet. Just the familiar weight of being erased before you even opened your mouth. "I'm a veteran," she said. "Oh." His smile was patronizing, the kind reserved for people you had to be polite to but didn't take seriously. "What did you do, admin?" "I flew." "Flew what desks?" He laughed at his own joke. Elena didn't answer. She'd learned a long time ago that some battles weren't worth the ammunition. She moved past him into the main hall, where clusters of men in various stages of aging stood around high-top tables, swapping stories that grew more heroic with each beer. She found a spot near the back, away from the noise. A waitress brought her water without being asked. Elena hadn't touched alcohol since 2009, since the night her wingman died, and she realized grief was already intoxicating enough. "Mind if I sit here?" Elena looked up. The woman was about her age, with silver hair, cut military short, and eyes that had seen things they'd never fully forget. "Please," Elena said. Sarah Chen. 20 years Army intelligence. She extended her hand. Elena Castellano, 28 years Air Force. Sarah's eyebrows rose. 28. That's a career. What did you do? Elena hesitated. This was always the moment where she had to decide whether to tell the truth or let people keep their assumptions. I was a pilot. No kidding. What did you fly? F-15 Strike Eagle. Sarah's water glass stopped halfway to her mouth. You're serious. Dead serious. Combat. 3 tours, Iraq and Afghanistan. Jesus. Sarah leaned back, studying Elena with new eyes. And they have you sitting in the back of the room like you're somebody's grandmother. Maybe I am somebody's grandmother. That's not the point. Elena knew it wasn't the point. But she was tired of making the point. She'd spent 28 years making the point, and she'd retired hoping she wouldn't have to anymore. Hey! A voice boomed across the hall. We're starting the remembrance circle. All veterans to the center. Sarah stood. Come on. Elena followed her into the growing circle. About 40 people, mostly men, mostly older than the kid at the door. A few women scattered throughout nurses admin, one other pilot who flew transport. The room settled into respectful silence as a chaplain stepped into the center. Tonight we gather to honor those who served, those who sacrificed, and those who never made it home. His voice was practiced smooth. We'll go around the circle. State your name, branch, years of service, and if you'd like, share a brief memory of someone you lost. The circle began. Names and numbers, stories worn smooth by repetition. When it reached Elena, she kept it simple. Elena Castellano, United States Air Force, 28 years, combat pilot. She paused. The chaplain nodded encouragingly. I lost my wingman, Captain David Torres, in 2009. He was 29 years old. He died saving my life. The weight of those words never got lighter. The circle continued. When it finished, the formal part of the evening dissolved back into informal clusters. Elena was heading toward the exit. She'd done her duty, shown her face, when a hand caught her arm. "Excuse me." She turned. 3 young officers, all Marine Corps, all looking at her with expressions somewhere between curiosity and amusement. "Yes." "We couldn't help but overhear," the tallest one said. His name tag read Drake. Captain Drake. "You said you were a combat pilot. That's right? In the Air Force?" "Yes." He exchanged glances with his friends. "That's impressive. Really impressive. What years were you deployed?" 2003, 2005, and 2007 to 2009. "And you flew?" He made a show of trying to remember. "What was it, F-15s?" "Strike Eagles." "Yes." "Huh." He smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "That's interesting because I have a buddy who flew F-15s in Iraq, and he said they didn't really start letting women into those cockpits until way later." Elena's jaw tightened. "Your buddy was misinformed." "Maybe," Drake shrugged. "Or maybe you're misremembering your MOS. It happens with older folks. Memory gets fuzzy." One of his friends snickered. Sarah appeared at Elena's side. "Is there a problem here, Captain?" "No problem," Drake said smoothly. "Just having a conversation with a fellow veteran, trying to understand her service record." "Her service record is none of your business," Sarah said. "Hey, I'm just curious." Drake held up his hands in mock innocence. "We're all brothers and sisters in arms here, right? We should be able to ask each other questions, verify things." "Verify?" Elena's voice was quiet, dangerous. "Well, you know how it is. Stolen valor is a real problem. People claiming they did things they didn't do, wearing uniforms they didn't earn." His eyes drifted to the small pin on Elena's collar, a silver eagle in flight. "Where'd you get that?" "It was a gift." "From who?" "That's personal." "See, that's what I mean. If you really flew combat missions, you'd have stories, details. You'd want to share them. But you're being evasive." The room's attention was shifting toward them now. Conversations dying, eyes turning. Elena felt the familiar constriction in her chest, the same one she'd felt 1,000 times before. In briefing rooms where men talked over her. In ready rooms where her presence was treated as a social experiment. In cockpits where her every mistake was magnified and her every success was minimized. "I don't need to prove anything to you," she said. Drake's smile widened. "That's exactly what someone with something to hide would say." "Captain." An older man stepped forward, a colonel, judging by his bearing. "That's enough." "Sir, with all due respect, I'm just protecting the integrity of this gathering. If she really served the way she claims, I said that's enough." Drake backed down, but his eyes never left Elena. The colonel, his name tag read Morrison, gave Elena an apologetic nod. "I'm sorry about that, ma'am. Some of our younger officers forget their manners." "It's fine," Elena said. It wasn't fine. It was never fine. She excused herself and headed for the bathroom, needing a moment away from the stares and whispers. Inside, she gripped the sink and stared at her reflection. 50 years old. Gray threading through her dark hair, lines around her eyes from squinting into too many sunrises at 30,000 feet. The door opened. A young woman in Air Force blues stepped in. Couldn't be more than 22. "Ma'am, are you okay?" "I'm fine. I heard what that Marine said to you. That was totally out of line." Elena managed a tired smile. "It's not the first time. Still, you shouldn't have to deal with that." The girl hesitated. "Were you really a Strike Eagle pilot?" "Yes." "That's so cool. I'm trying to get into flight school. Everyone keeps telling me to aim for transport or tankers, but I want fighters." "Then fight for fighters. Did you have to fight for it?" Elena almost laughed. Fight for it. That was putting it mildly. "Every single day," she said. The girl's radio crackled. She excused herself, leaving Elena alone again. In the mirror, Elena saw not just her present self, but the ghost of her younger self, the 24-year-old who'd walked into her first squadron ready room. and been greeted with silence and skepticism. She'd proven herself that day, and the next day, and every day after for 28 years. She was tired of proving herself. When Elena returned to the main hall, the atmosphere had shifted. Drake and his friends were louder now, emboldened by alcohol and the lack of consequences. They'd claimed a table near the center of the room, holding court. "I'm just saying," Drake's voice carried, "we need to be careful about who we honor in these spaces. Not everyone who claims they served actually served. Not everyone who wore the uniform wore it honorably." He wasn't looking at Elena, but she knew the words were meant for her. Sarah gripped her arm. "Ignore him. He's a child. He's a captain in the United States Marine Corps. He's still a child." But children with rank were dangerous. Elena had learned that lesson too. She'd seen careers destroyed by men who couldn't handle their own insecurity. The evening dragged on. Elena stayed longer than she wanted to, refusing to let Drake's presence drive her away. She talked to other veterans, real conversations with people who actually listened. A Navy corpsman who'd served in Fallujah, an Army sergeant who'd lost both legs to an IED, a Coast Guard rescue swimmer who'd pulled 12 people from a sinking ship. Real heroes who didn't need to announce it. But Drake's voice was a constant background noise, growing louder with each drink. And I'm telling you, half these people claiming combat experience never saw real action. They sat on bases away from the wire, and now they want credit for being warriors. Women especially. Not saying they can't serve, but let's be real about what they actually did versus what they claim they did. Participation trophies and politically correct promotions. Elena's hands curled into fists. Sarah noticed. "He's trying to bait you," Sarah whispered. "Don't give him what he wants." "What does he want?" "To prove you're emotional, irrational, everything he thinks women are." Elena knew Sarah was right, but knowing something intellectually and controlling your emotional response were two different things. The evening was winding down. People were leaving, calling rides, saying goodbyes. Elena was gathering her things when Drake appeared beside her. "Hey," he said, his voice carrying the careful articulation of someone trying not to slur. "I wanted to apologize." Elena looked at him, searching for sincerity. She found none. "Okay," she said carefully. "I came on a little strong earlier. Morrison chewed me out, said I was being disrespectful." He leaned against the table, too close to her personal space. "But between you and me, I think you understand where I was coming from." "Do I?" "Sure, you seem like a reasonable person. You know how it is. People exaggerate their service all the time. It's natural. They want to feel special, like they were part of something bigger. No harm in that, really. But when you're around real warriors, people who actually kicked down doors and took fire, you've got to be honest about what you really did." Each word was a calculated insult wrapped in false reasonableness. "So what did you really do?" He smiled. "Transport logistics. It's okay to admit it. Those jobs are important too. Somebody's got to do them." Elena set down her purse. When she spoke, her voice was perfectly calm. "I flew 247 combat missions over Iraq and Afghanistan. I logged 1,843 combat hours. I provided close air support for ground troops in 89 separate engagements. I dropped ordnance in danger-close situations 42 times. I was shot at by enemy fire 33 times. I took damage 8 times. I lost my wingman to a surface-to-air missile while covering a medevac extraction. I was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross the Air Medal with Valor Device and the Purple Heart. My call sign was Iron Lady, given to me by the Marines I kept alive in the Korangal Valley when their position was about to be overrun." The room had gone silent again, but this time it was different. Drake's smile faltered. "The Korangal Valley. You've heard of it. Everyone's heard of it. That was 2008, right? When that whole platoon almost got wiped out, but they had air support that stayed on station for 11 hours straight, way past fuel reserves, landing at Bagram on fumes." 6 minutes of fuel," Elena said. "We had 6 minutes left when we touched down." Drake stared at her, really looked at her for the first time all night. "That was you. That was me and my wingman. The wingman who died a year later, saving my life when my aircraft took fire and I lost hydraulics." The color drained from Drake's face. Someone else spoke up, an older man Elena hadn't noticed before sitting at the bar. He walked over. He was massive, easily 6'4", with the weathered face of someone who'd spent their life in hard places. "Your Iron Lady." Elena looked at him. "Yes. Jesus Christ." He turned to Drake. "You stupid son of a bitch, do you have any idea who you've been harassing?" Drake couldn't speak. The big man looked at Elena and she saw tears forming in his eyes. "Ma'am, First Sergeant Marcus Webb, retired. I was in the Korangal, 3rd Platoon Charlie Company. I was one of the Marines you saved." The room was completely silent now. Webb's voice cracked. "We'd been pinned down for 6 hours. Lost 3 guys. Ran out of ammo. Called in every asset we had, but the weather was shit and the valley was hot. Everyone else waved off. But you came in. You and your wingman dropped bombs so close we felt the heat on our faces. You made 8 passes through ground fire to keep those Taliban fighters off us until the QRF could reach our position." He wiped his eyes. "You saved 19 lives that night, ma'am. 19 Marines who got to go home because you refused to leave. I got to meet my daughter because of you. She's 8 years old now." His voice broke completely. "Thank you. I never got to say thank you." Elena felt her own composure cracking. "You don't have to thank me, Sergeant. I was doing my job." It was more than a job. Webb turned to face the room, his voice rising. "This woman is a goddamn hero, and you've been treating her like she's nobody." Drake looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. His friends had already abandoned him, melting away into the crowd. Morrison, the colonel, stepped forward. His expression was grave. "Captain Drake, outside, now." Drake's face was ashen. "Sir, I didn't know." "Outside." They left. The room erupted in whispers. Webb was still standing there looking at Elena like she was a ghost made real. "Can I buy you a drink, ma'am? A coffee, anything?" "I'm okay," Elena said softly. "But thank you. Do you remember that night? Do you remember us?" Did she remember? She remembered every night, every mission, every voice on the radio screaming for help. Every time she lined up a bomb run, knowing that if she missed by 10 meters, she'd kill the people she was trying to save. "I remember," she said. "You were call sign Victor 3-1. Your radio operator kept his voice calm even when you were taking fire from 3 sides. He sounded very young." Webb laughed, tears streaming down his face now. "That was Martinez. He was 19, still in the Corps actually. Made captain last year." "Good for him." Other people were approaching now. A woman, Elena's age, trembling. "My son was in that valley. My son came home because of you." An older man with a cane. "I flew rescue birds. We heard about what you did. Everyone in theater heard about it." More voices, more hands reaching out to shake hers or touch her shoulder, or just be near someone who represented something larger than themselves. Elena felt overwhelmed, exposed. This was why she'd retired. This was why she'd tried to slip into anonymity. She didn't want to be a symbol. She didn't want to be Iron Lady anymore. She just wanted to be Elena, a woman who'd done her job and survived and was trying to figure out what came next. But the job wouldn't let her go. Sarah was suddenly there, creating space around Elena, gently moving people back. "Give her some room, please." The crowd reluctantly dispersed. Sarah guided Elena to a quiet corner. "You okay?" "I don't know. That was intense. That was a nightmare." Elena rubbed her face. "I came here to be anonymous." "Anonymous. You're Iron Lady. You're a legend." "Legends aren't real. I'm real. And real means I'm tired and I have arthritis in my hands from years of high G turns, and I have nightmares about the missions where I didn't arrive in time. Legends don't have nightmares." Sarah squeezed her shoulder. "Want to get out of here?" "More than anything." They headed for the exit. Before they reached it, Morrison returned without Drake. "Major Castellano." He stood at attention. "May I have a word?" Elena just wanted to leave, but she nodded. Morrison's face was tight with controlled anger. "I owe you an apology. Captain Drake's behavior was inexcusable. He's been removed from this event, and there will be consequences. That's not necessary. It absolutely is necessary. What he did, what he said, that can't stand. You deserve respect, not interrogation. Colonel, with all due respect, this happens all the time. To me, to every woman who served in combat roles. If you punish everyone who questions us, who assumes we're lying or exaggerating, you'll be holding courts-martial every day. Morrison's jaw worked. That doesn't make it right. No, but punishing one captain won't change the culture. It'll just make him resentful. Then what do you suggest? Elena thought about it. About Drake's face when he realized who she was. About the fear and shame and shock. About how he was young enough to learn if someone taught him. Let me talk to him, she said. Morrison looked surprised. You want to talk to him? I want to try to make something good come from this, if that's possible. Ma'am, he doesn't deserve your time. Maybe not. But those Marines in the Korangal didn't deserve to die either, and I helped them anyway. This is what we do. We help even when it's hard. Morrison studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I'll arrange it. Tomorrow, if you're willing. My office. I'll be there. He saluted. Elena returned it. He left. Sarah shook her head in disbelief. You're seriously going to counsel the guy who spent all night calling you a liar? I'm going to try. You're a better person than me. I'm a tired person who's seen enough conflict to last several lifetimes. If I can prevent one more battle, I will. They walked out into the cool night air. The parking lot was mostly empty now. Elena's car was one of the few remaining. Thank you, Elena said to Sarah, for having my back in there. Always. That's what we do. Sarah paused. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why'd you retire if you were that good? They would have kept promoting you. You could have been a general. Elena smiled sadly. I didn't want to be a general. I wanted to fly. And they don't let generals fly. Besides, she trailed off. Besides what? Besides, I got tired of fighting two wars. The one overseas and the one in my own ranks. Sarah nodded understanding. Yeah, I get that. They exchanged numbers, promised to stay in touch, promises that might or might not be kept. Then Sarah drove away, and Elena was alone in the parking lot. She sat in her car for a long time, hands on the steering wheel, not starting the engine. Inside her head, she could still hear the voices from the Korangal Valley. Young men screaming into radios, their words barely coherent through fear and pain and the overwhelming noise of war. She could hear her own voice calm and steady, calling out coordinates and weapon types and danger distances. She could hear the explosions. She could hear the silence that followed the precious, terrible silence that meant everyone who was supposed to be alive still was. And she could hear David Torres, her wingman, calling out over the radio, the last words he'd ever say to her. You're clear, Iron Lady. Get home safe. He hadn't made it home. She had. That was the calculus of war, random and brutal and impossible to reconcile with any sense of fairness or justice. Elena finally started the car. As she drove home through empty streets, she thought about tomorrow's meeting with Drake. She didn't know what she'd say to him. Didn't know if anything she said would matter. But she'd show up. She always showed up. That's what Iron Lady meant. It meant showing up when everyone else waved off. It meant staying in the fight when common sense said retreat. It meant protecting people who didn't even know they needed protecting. Even if those people included a young captain who'd spent an entire evening trying to prove she didn't exist. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is First Sergeant Webb. I got your number from Sarah Chen. I hope that's okay. I just wanted to say again, thank you. For everything. My daughter's name is Elena, by the way. We named her after you. We never thought we'd get to tell you that. Elena pulled over, read the message again. Felt something crack open in her chest, not breaking, but opening. A release of pressure she hadn't known she was holding. She typed back, that's the greatest honor you could give me. Thank you for telling me. And please, thank your daughter for carrying that name. I'll try to be worthy of it. She sat there in her parked car in a quiet residential neighborhood and cried for the first time in years. Not from sadness, not from anger, but from relief. Because maybe, just maybe, all those nights in the dark, all those impossible decisions, all those close calls and lost friends and scars, both visible and invisible. Maybe they'd meant something after all. Maybe she'd meant something. And maybe tomorrow, when she sat across from Captain Drake, she could help him understand that service wasn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It was about being the steady voice on the radio when everything else was falling apart. It was about being iron when the world needed steel. Elena wiped her eyes, put the car back in drive, and headed home. Tomorrow would bring new battles. But tonight, for the first time in a long time, she felt something close to peace. The Iron Lady was finally learning to rest, but her story, their story, was far from over. End of Part 1. Retry TS Part 2. Lưu ý viết 5.900 từ liên kết liền mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện pha hội thoại tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch. Khi ghép lại, mỗi phần liền mạch với phần trước không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới. Liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch. Sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề, tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề. Phụ phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ Hoa Kỳ, giống văn giàu cảm xúc chân thực và gần gũi, không mô tả cảnh, tập trung vào hành động, cảm xúc và tâm lý nhân vật. Viết phần 2 đạt điểm 10 và bổ sung tiết tấu câu chuyện nhanh, sửa lời AI kể theo ngôi thứ 3. Tăng độ kịch tính, không viết lan man, kết thúc phần không giới thiệu phần sau. Lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn không nhảy sang mục document mới 2-3 phút, cần có mini climax và đạt 10-15 mini climax mỗi phần, cứ 10-12 phút có một twist lớn sâu sắc, đàn sen, mini cliffhanger mạnh hơn. Tăng tính tự nhiên cho phản ứng của các nhân vật, thêm nhịp điệu, kịch tính thực tế và gần gũi. 18-10 phút cần có móc giữ chân khán giả. Lưu ý không mô tả cảnh và chỉ cần viết nội dung và viết đúng lên nhé. Show more Part 2. The confrontation. Elena didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the reunion. Drake's smirk, Webb's tears, the weight of 19 lives she'd saved but never knew she'd saved. At 0500, she gave up on sleep and made coffee. Her hands shook slightly as she poured, not from fear, but from something deeper. Anticipation, dread, the feeling you get before walking into hostile territory. Her phone rang. Morrison's number. Castellano. Major, I wanted to confirm our meeting. 0900, my office on base. Captain Drake will be there. Are you still willing? I'll be there. Good. And Major, thank you. What you're doing, it takes character. Character. Elena almost laughed. Character was just another word for doing hard things nobody else wanted to do. She arrived at the base at 0845. The gate guard checked her ID, her retired military ID that listed her rank and years of service. His eyes widened when he saw it. Ma'am, you're Iron Lady. Word traveled fast. That's what they called me. My instructor in boot camp told us about you, about the Korangal mission. He said you were the toughest pilot the Air Force ever produced. The young Marine's voice cracked with admiration. It's an honor, ma'am. Elena felt that familiar discomfort. Just doing my job, Marine. No, ma'am. You were saving lives. That's more than a job. She drove onto the base past buildings she recognized and some she didn't. Military installations changed constantly. New construction, new commanders, new policies. But the feeling never changed. That sense of belonging and alienation happening simultaneously. Morrison's office was in the headquarters building. His aide, a sharp-eyed lieutenant, showed her in immediately. Major Castellano. Morrison stood, shook her hand firmly. Coffee, please. He poured 2 cups. His office walls were covered with plaques and photos, a career documented in wood and glass. She noticed a photo of a young Morrison in flight gear standing next to an F-16. You flew 20 years. Then they promoted me and put me behind a desk. He smiled ruefully. I still miss it. You never stop missing it. They sat. Morrison's expression turned serious. Captain Drake will be here in 5 minutes. I want you to know he's been officially reprimanded. It's in his record. His commanding officer is considering further action. What kind of action? Potentially a board of inquiry. His behavior reflected poorly on the entire corps. Elena set down her coffee. That seems excessive. Does it? He publicly accused a decorated combat veteran of stolen valor. He harassed you. He created a hostile environment. If the commandant hears about this, then don't tell the commandant. Morrison stared at her. You're defending him. I'm saying that destroying his career won't fix anything. It'll just make him bitter and confirm his biases. He'll spend the rest of his life telling people that women are too sensitive, that he was punished for asking legitimate questions. He wasn't asking legitimate questions, he was bullying you. Yes, and he needs to understand why that was wrong. A board of inquiry won't teach him that. It'll just teach him to hide his prejudices better. Morrison leaned back in his chair, studying her. You really believe you can reach him? I have to try. Because if I can't reach one captain in a controlled environment, how do we reach thousands of service members in the field? A knock at the door. The aide poked his head in. Sir, Captain Drake is here. Send him in. Drake entered looking like a man walking to his own execution. His uniform was immaculate, but his face was pale, his eyes bloodshot. He'd had the same sleepless night Elena had, but for very different reasons. He stood at attention. Sir, Major Castellano. Sit down, Captain, Morrison said. Drake sat ramrod straight, his hands on his knees. He looked at neither of them, fixing his gaze somewhere over Morrison's shoulder. Captain Drake, Morrison began. Major Castellano has requested this meeting. Against my better judgment, I'm allowing it. You will listen to what she has to say. You will show respect. If you interrupt, if you show even a hint of the attitude you displayed last night, you will be out of my office and in front of a board so fast you'll get whiplash. Am I clear? Crystal clear, sir. Morrison gestured to Elena. She took a slow breath. Captain Drake, look at me. Drake's eyes reluctantly met hers. Last night you spent several hours questioning my service, my integrity, and my right to be in that room. You implied I was lying about my record. You suggested I was committing stolen valor. Why? Drake's jaw worked. Ma'am, I'm not asking for an apology yet. I'm asking for an explanation. Why did you assume I was lying? The silence stretched. Elena waited. This was the crucial moment. Would he be honest, or would he hide behind excuses? Finally, Drake spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Because I didn't believe a woman could do what you claimed. Why not? Because... He stopped, struggled. Because in my experience, women in the military don't serve in those roles. Or if they do, they don't see real combat. They're protected, kept away from the worst of it. Protected by whom? By command, by policy, by reality. Elena leaned forward. Captain, what year did you commission? 2019, ma'am. So you've been in for 6 years. I served for 28. I flew my first combat mission in 2003 when you were probably in middle school. Do you know what the military looked like in 2003? Not entirely, ma'am. Women weren't officially allowed in combat roles. The policy said we couldn't serve in units whose primary mission was direct ground combat. But that policy was meaningless in Iraq and Afghanistan because there were no front lines. Female soldiers were getting shot at, hit by IEDs, killed in action. But officially they weren't in combat. Drake listened, his expression unreadable. I flew Strike Eagles, attack aircraft. My job was to drop bombs on enemy positions and provide close air support for ground troops. I did it 247 times. But according to the official policy at the time, I wasn't in combat because my primary unit wasn't designated as a combat unit. Do you understand how insane that is? Yes, ma'am. I had male pilots in my squadron who flew fewer missions than me, logged fewer combat hours, took less enemy fire. But they got credit for being warriors, and I got questions about whether I was really there. Do you know why? Drake didn't answer. Because people like you couldn't reconcile what I did with your idea of what women should be able to do. So you decided I must be exaggerating, or lying, or confused. Ma'am, I was wrong. I'm not finished. Elena's voice remained calm but firm. You asked me last night about my call sign. You assumed it would be something diminishing, something cute or condescending. The men I served with called me Iron Lady. Do you know why? First Sergeant Webb said, "That's one story. There are others." Elena paused, letting the weight settle. In 2007, I flew a mission in the Helmand province. A Marine platoon was pinned down in a compound. They'd been there for 14 hours. Taliban fighters had them surrounded. Air support kept getting called off because of bad weather and heavy ground fire. Drake was listening now, really listening. I got the call at 0200. My aircraft was already loaded for a different mission, so we had to reconfigure everything. By the time we got airborne, the weather had gotten worse. Visibility was near zero. The ground fire was so thick it looked like fireworks. Elena's voice stayed steady, but her hands clenched slightly. Command called me 3 times, telling me to abort. The mission was too dangerous. The risk was too high, but I could hear those Marines on the radio. I could hear them dying. The room was completely silent. I made 7 passes over that compound. On the 3rd pass, I took fire that shredded my left stabilizer. On the 5th pass, shrapnel punctured my fuel tank. Command ordered me to return to base immediately. I refused. I had 19 men on the ground who needed me more than I needed to be safe. Drake's hands were shaking now. On my 7th pass, I dropped my last bomb. Direct hit on the enemy position. The Marines were able to break out and reach the extraction point. All 19 survived. I made it back to Bagram on emergency fuel, landed with warning lights screaming, and had to be extracted from my cockpit by the fire crew because I couldn't move my left arm. Took shrapnel in my shoulder. That's where the Purple Heart came from. Elena pulled down the collar of her shirt, slightly revealing a jagged scar on her shoulder. When I got out of the hospital, my squadron commander asked me how I stayed so calm during the mission. I told him I didn't have a choice. The Marines needed iron, not panic. He said, "Your hands are iron. Your will is iron. Your whole damn soul is iron." The nickname stuck. Drake's face had gone from pale to ashen. So when you asked me last night about my call sign, when you laughed and assumed it was something frivolous, you were laughing at 19 Marines who are alive today because I refused to quit. You were laughing at the 7 surgeries I had to repair my shoulder. You were laughing at the nightmares I still have about whether I made the right call, whether I endangered my crew to save strangers. Ma'am, Drake's voice broke. But here's what you need to understand, Captain. I'm not angry at you. Drake looked up shocked. I'm disappointed. Because you're not the first person to doubt me and you won't be the last. But you had a chance last night to be different, to ask real questions, to learn. Instead, you chose mockery and accusations. Why? Drake's composure finally cracked. Because I'm a coward, ma'am. Morrison shifted in his seat, but Elena held up a hand. Explain. I've done 2 deployments. I've seen combat. But nothing like what you described. Nothing like the Korangal or Helmand. I've never had to make those kinds of decisions. Drake's voice was raw. And when I met you last night, when you said what you'd done, I felt small, inadequate. Like everything I'd accomplished meant nothing compared to your service. So, you tried to tear me down. Yes, ma'am. I tried to convince myself and everyone else that you couldn't possibly be what you said you were. Because if you were real, then I had to face the fact that I'm not the warrior I thought I was. The honesty was brutal, laid bare like an open wound. Elena sat back. Captain, do you know what the hardest part of my service was? The combat. No. The combat was straightforward. There was an enemy, a mission, a clear objective. The hardest part was the other stuff, the assumptions. The constant need to prove myself. The men who helped me and the men who hindered me. The women who resented me for making them look bad, and the women who expected me to fix every problem women in the military faced. She met Drake's eyes. The hardest part was staying professional when people like you questioned everything I did. When my successes were attributed to luck or help from men, and my failures were proof that women shouldn't be there. The hardest part was carrying the weight of being a symbol when I just wanted to be a pilot. Drake wiped his eyes roughly. I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm so sorry. I know you are, but sorry isn't enough. What do you want me to do? Elena considered the question. What did she want? public humiliation, career destruction, revenge number. She wanted change. Real change. "I want you to learn," she said finally. "I want you to take this experience and become better. I want you to mentor the junior Marines under your command and teach them that respect isn't about gender or job specialty. It's about character and service. I want you to be the officer who stands up when someone else does what you did last night." "Yes, ma'am, I will. I promise." "Promises are easy, Captain. Follow through is hard." Morrison cleared his throat. "Major, what do you recommend for Captain Drake's reprimand?" Elena looked at Drake, then at Morrison. "I recommend mandatory training on the history of women in combat. I recommend he writes a formal apology, not to me, but to be read at the next veterans gathering. I recommend he volunteers with veteran organizations that support women transitioning out of military service. And I recommend that in 6 months he reports back on what he's learned." Morrison nodded slowly. "Captain Drake, you heard the Major's recommendations. Consider them orders. You have 6 months to prove you deserve to keep wearing that uniform. Dismissed." Drake stood, saluted, and turned to leave. At the door, he stopped. "Ma'am." "Yes, Captain." "Last night, First Sergeant Webb said you saved 19 Marines in the Korengal. My uncle was one of them." Elena went still. "I didn't know until this morning. I called my mother to tell her what I'd done, what an idiot I'd been. She told me my uncle talks about Iron Lady every year at Thanksgiving, how a female pilot saved his life when everyone else had given up on them. She said he cries every time he tells the story." Drake's voice was thick with emotion. "I spent last night calling you a liar, and you'd saved my uncle's life. I don't deserve your mercy, ma'am, but thank you for giving it anyway." He left before Elena could respond. Morrison poured more coffee, his hands steady. "That was extraordinary. That was exhausting. You gave him a second chance. Everyone deserves a second chance. I just hope he uses it." "Do you think he will?" Elena thought about Drake's face, the genuine anguish in his eyes. "Maybe, if he's willing to do the work. And if he's not, then he'll become another cautionary tale, another officer who couldn't adapt, couldn't grow, couldn't see past his own limitations." Morrison studied her. "Can I ask you something personal?" "You can ask." "Why did you retire? You could have stayed in, made general, changed the system from the inside." Elena smiled sadly. "I was tired, Colonel. 28 years of proving myself, of fighting battles on 2 fronts, the enemy overseas and the bias at home. I wanted to stop fighting. But you're still fighting. You came here today. You faced Drake. You're still in the arena." "I guess I am." Elena stood gathering her things. "Maybe I don't know how to stop. Or maybe you know the fight isn't over." She paused at the door. "The fight will never be over, Colonel. Not in our lifetime. But maybe, if enough of us keep showing up, keep telling our stories, keep refusing to be erased, the next generation won't have to fight as hard. That's all we can hope for." Elena left the office, walked through the headquarters building, and stepped into bright morning sunlight. She felt lighter somehow, as if confronting Drake had released something she'd been carrying for years. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "How'd it go with the Marine?" Elena replied. "Better than expected. He might actually learn something." "You're too kind." Or too optimistic. Same thing. "Coffee later." "I'd like that." Elena drove off the base past the gate guard who saluted her past the buildings and barracks and training fields. She thought about Drake, about Webb, about all the people whose lives had intersected with hers in ways she'd never fully understand. She thought about the 19 Marines in the Korengal Valley living their lives somewhere, raising children, working jobs, never thinking about how close they'd come to dying. She thought about David Torres, her wingman who'd never gotten to do any of those things. That night, Elena's daughter called. 32 years old, Air Force captain, helicopter pilot. "Mom, you okay? I heard what happened at the reunion." "How did you hear about that?" "Mom, your Iron Lady. Everyone's heard about it. It's all over the veteran Facebook groups. Someone posted a video. Elena's heart sank. Someone filmed it. Not the whole thing, just Webb talking about the Korangal mission, and you telling Drake your record. Mom, it's gone viral. Over 2 million views. Oh God. People are calling you a hero. I'm not a hero, Rachel. I was a pilot doing my job. That's what all heroes say. Rachel paused. Mom, I'm proud of you. Not just for what you did in the Korangal, but for how you handled Drake. That took real strength. Elena felt tears prickling her eyes. How's your assignment going? It's hard. The guys in my unit, they're not terrible, but they don't take me seriously. They call me princess and assume I can't handle the rough missions. Do you call them on it? Sometimes. But then I'm the angry feminist who can't take a joke. Elena closed her eyes. Same story, different generation. Rachel, listen to me. You're going to face men like Drake your entire career. Some of them will learn, some won't. But you can't let them define your service. You define it. I know, Mom. It's just sometimes I wonder if it's worth it. All the fighting, the constant need to prove myself. You retired because you were tired of it. What if I get tired too? Then you rest. And when you're ready, you get back up. That's what we do. Is that what you're doing, resting? Elena thought about the reunion, about Drake, about the unexpected confrontation with her own past. I thought I was. Turns out I'm still fighting. Will you ever stop? Probably not. It's who I am. They talked for another hour, mother and daughter. Both pilots, both warriors, both carrying the weight of being symbols when they just wanted to be people. After they hung up, Elena sat in her quiet house and thought about legacy. What did she want to leave behind? War stories, medals, a call sign that sounded impressive but represented nights she'd rather forget. No. She wanted to leave a path, a slightly easier road for Rachel and all the women who'd come after. She wanted to leave a world where female pilots weren't questioned at veteran reunions, where their service was assumed, not interrogated. But that world didn't exist yet, so she'd keep fighting for it. Her phone rang again. Unknown number. Hello. Major Castellano. This is Lieutenant General Patricia Hayes, Air Force Personnel Command. Elena sat up straight. General, I wasn't expecting... I heard about what happened at the reunion. I also heard about your conversation with Captain Drake this morning. General, I can explain. Major, I'm not calling to reprimand you. I'm calling to offer you a job. Elena blinked. A job? We're developing a new training program for junior officers. Focus on leadership, diversity, and professional development. We need someone to run it. Someone with credibility, combat experience, and the ability to connect with service members across all branches. General, I'm retired. You'd come back as a contractor. Full benefits, competitive salary, minimal travel. You'd be based here in DC, but most of the work would be remote, developing curriculum, training trainers, conducting virtual workshops. Why me? Because you're Iron Lady. Because you've lived the challenges we're trying to address. Because you walked into a hostile environment yesterday and turned an enemy into a student. That's the kind of leader we need. Elena's mind raced. Go back. Return to the military world she'd worked so hard to leave. General, can I think about it? Take a week. But Major, we need you. The next generation needs you. After the call ended, Elena sat in darkness thinking. She'd retired to escape the fight, but maybe that wasn't possible. Maybe the fight followed you, lived inside you, refused to be denied. Maybe being Iron Lady wasn't something you could take off like a uniform. Maybe it was who you were down in your bones, whether you wanted it or not. Her phone buzzed. Another text from Sarah. Dinner tomorrow. There are some people I want you to meet. Other female vets dealing with similar situations. We're forming a support network. Elena smiled. Of course they were. Because that's what you did. You found your people. You shared your stories. You helped each other survive. She replied, I'll be there. Because that's what Iron Lady did. She showed up. She stayed in the fight. She refused to quit even when quitting would be easier. Even when she was tired, scared, hurting, doubting herself, she showed up. And tomorrow, she'd show up again. And the day after that. And every day after until the fight was won or she couldn't fight anymore, whichever came first. Elena turned off her phone, walked to her bedroom, and for the first time in years slept through the night without nightmares. Because sometimes the only thing you need to defeat the darkness is to know you're not fighting alone. Retry TS, Part 3. Lưu ý, viết 49,900 từ liên kết liền mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện và hội thoại tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liền mạch với phần trước không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới. Liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch. Sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề, tránh ngắt quãng, đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề phụ phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ Hoa Kỳ, giống văn giàu cảm xúc chân thực và gần gũi, không mô tả cảnh tập trung vào hành động cảm xúc và tâm lý nhân vật. Viết phần 3, đặt điểm 10/10 và bổ sung tiết tấu câu chuyện nhanh, sửa lời AI kể theo ngôi thứ 3, tăng độ kịch tính, không viết lận man, kết thúc phần không giới thiệu phần sau. Lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn, không nhảy sang mức document mới 2-3 phút. Cần có mini climax và đặt 10-15 mini climax mời. Phần cự 10-12 phút có một twist lớn sâu sắc đan xen mini cliffhanger mạnh hơn. Tăng tính tự nhiên cho phản ứng của các nhân vật, thêm nhịp điệu kịch tính thực tế và gần gũi. Mỗi 8-10 phút cần có móc giữ chân khán giả. Lưu ý không mô tả cảnh và chỉ cần viết nội dung và viết đúng lệnh nha. Show more. Part 3. The Reckoning. The restaurant Sarah chose was quiet, tucked away in a strip mall between a dry cleaner and a tax office. Elena arrived 10 minutes early and immediately regretted it. Through the window, she could see a table of women already seated waiting. 6 of them, all watching the door. Her instinct was to leave, drive away, make an excuse about a family emergency or sudden illness. But she'd spent 28 years walking into rooms where people didn't want her, so she pushed through the door. Sarah stood immediately. Elena, you made it. I said I would. Come meet everyone. Sarah gestured to the table. This is Major Christine Park, Army, Lieutenant Commander Jennifer Walsh, Navy, Captain Rita Morales, Marine Corps, Master Sergeant Denise Freeman, Air Force, Staff Sergeant Amy Chen, Army, and Captain Yolanda Baptiste, Air Force. They all nodded, smiled, assessed her with the particular scrutiny women in male-dominated fields developed. Elena knew that look. She'd given it herself countless times. Sit, please. Christine Park indicated the empty chair. We ordered appetizers. Hope you're hungry. Elena wasn't hungry, but she sat anyway. The women looked like they ranged from late 30s to mid-50s. Battle-worn, experienced, tired in ways that had nothing to do with sleep. Sarah told us what happened at the reunion, Jennifer Walsh said. Her voice was direct, no nonsense. We've all dealt with similar situations. Thought it might help to compare notes. I appreciate that, but I'm not sure what there is to say. How about the truth? Rita Morales leaned forward. How about the fact that we've all been where you were standing in front of men who don't believe we belong, defending service we shouldn't have to defend? Elena felt something tighten in her chest. It's different for everyone. Is it? Denise Freeman's laugh was bitter. I was a para-rescue jumper. You know how many times I got asked if I was really qualified? If I really made it through training? If standards were lowered for me? Every single day, Amy Chen said quietly. I was EOD, bomb disposal. Lost 3 fingers on my left hand during a deployment. Still had male soldiers asking if I was sure I could handle the stress. Elena looked at Amy's hand. 3 fingers missing. Purple Heart probably. Bronze Star maybe. And still questioned. The Drake situation got media attention, Sarah said. Local news picked it up. Now it's spreading. Veterans groups are sharing it. Some are supportive. Others are saying I'm playing the victim card, Elena finished. I've seen the comments. You've been reading the comments? Yolanda Baptiste shook her head. First rule of going viral, never read the comments. I needed to know what people were saying. Why, you already know what they're saying. Same thing they always say. Christine's voice was hard. She's lying. She's exaggerating. Standards were lowered. She slept her way to those medals. She's using her gender to get attention. Each accusation landed like a physical blow because Elena had heard every single one and worse. Jennifer leaned in. 3 years ago, I testified before Congress about sexual assault in the military. Know what happened? My personnel file mysteriously got leaked. Every bad evaluation, every minor mistake I'd made in 20 years of service, suddenly public. They tried to destroy my credibility before I could even speak. Did it work? Elena asked. Almost. I had a breakdown, spent 2 months in treatment for PTSD and depression, but then I got angry, came back, testified anyway. They passed new legislation because of it. That's incredibly brave. It was incredibly necessary, just like what you did with Drake was necessary. Elena shook her head. I didn't do anything special. I just talked to him. You showed him grace he didn't deserve, Rita said. That's revolutionary. Most of us would have pushed for maximum punishment. You chose education. Because punishment wouldn't change anything. Maybe, or maybe you're still trying to prove women aren't emotional, aren't vindictive, aren't everything men say we are. Rita's tone was sharp, but not unkind. You're still performing for them, Elena. The words hit harder than Elena expected. I'm not performing. I'm trying to make things better. By sacrificing yourself, by being the perfect victim who handles everything with grace and dignity. Rita leaned back. That's what they expect from us. To absorb the abuse and smile. To teach our abusers gently, carefully, so their feelings don't get hurt. What's the alternative? Burn it all down. Maybe. Sometimes things need to burn before they can grow back healthy. The table fell into uncomfortable silence. A waitress appeared with appetizers, wings, mozzarella sticks, loaded nachos. Food none of them really wanted but would pick at anyway. Look, Denise said finally, we're not attacking you, Elena. We're just saying you don't have to carry this alone. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be Iron Lady every minute of every day. I don't know how to be anything else. Yes, you do. You're human. You're allowed to be angry, to be hurt, to want revenge sometimes. Revenge doesn't solve anything. Neither does turning the other cheek every time someone slaps you, Amy said softly. Eventually you run out of cheeks. Elena's phone buzzed. She ignored it. It buzzed again and again. You should check that, Sarah said. Elena pulled out her phone. 12 missed calls, 23 texts, all from numbers she didn't recognize. Her heart rate spiked. What's wrong? Christine asked. Elena opened the first text. It was a news article. The headline read, Iron Lady speaks out. Viral video exposes systemic sexism in military. I didn't speak out and speak. I just answered questions at a reunion. She scrolled through more texts. Some were supportive, thank you. You're a hero. We need more women like you. Others were vicious attention seeker, fake hero women ruin everything they touch. One message made her blood run cold. You should have died in that plane, bitch. Would have saved us all a lot of trouble. She set the phone down carefully, hands shaking. Death threat, Jennifer asked calmly. How did you know? Because we've all gotten them. Comes with the territory of being visible while female. Elena felt dizzy. I didn't ask for this. I just wanted to have a quiet drink at a reunion. And Drake made sure that didn't happen. Now you're public. Now you're a symbol whether you want to be or not. I can't be a symbol. I'm just tired. You think we're not tired? Rita's voice rose. We're all exhausted, Elena. But we don't have the luxury of stepping back because there are 20-year-old women enlisting right now who need to see that we made it, that we survived, that the fight is worth fighting. What if it's not worth it? What if nothing changes? Then we fight anyway, because what's the alternative? Elena didn't have an answer. She felt like she was drowning, pulled under by expectations and responsibilities and battles she'd never signed up for. Her phone rang. Rachel. Mom, are you okay? I'm seeing stuff online. I'm fine, honey. No, you're not. I can hear it in your voice. What's happening? Elena stepped away from the table, moving to the restaurant entrance. The reunion thing went viral. Now I'm getting messages. Some good, mostly bad. How bad? Death threats bad. Rachel's sharp intake of breath. Mom, you need to report those. Contact the police. It's just internet trolls. It's terrorism, Mom. They're trying to silence you. Well, it's working. No. Rachel's voice turned fierce. You don't get to quit. Not now. Not when people are watching. Not when young women like me need to see you stand up. Rachel, I'm 50 years old. I'm retired. I don't have to stand up anymore. Yes, you do. Because if you don't, they win. Drake wins. Every man who ever doubted us wins. Elena closed her eyes. That's not fair. Life's not fair, Mom. You taught me that. You also taught me that when someone pushes you down, you get back up. So get back up. The call ended. Elena stood there, phone in hand, feeling the weight of 28 years of service pressing down on her shoulders. When she returned to the table, 6 pairs of eyes studied her. My daughter thinks I should keep fighting, Elena said. Smart kid, Denise replied. I think I'm done fighting. No, you're not. Sarah's voice was gentle, but firm. You're scared. There's a difference. I have a right to be scared. I'm getting death threats. We know. We've all been there. Jennifer had someone show up at her house. Rita's car got vandalized. Amy's daughter got harassed at school. This is what happens when we refuse to disappear. Elena sank into her chair. Then maybe I should disappear. Maybe that's the smart move. It's the safe move, Christine said. But since when have any of us taken the safe move? Elena laughed bitterly. We should have learned. Probably. But we didn't. Because we're stubborn and stupid, and we actually believe things can get better. Can they? The women exchanged glances. Finally, Jennifer spoke. 3 years ago, I would have said no. But because of my testimony, policies changed. Because Rita filed complaints, training improved. Because Denise kept pushing, women got assigned to special operations units. We're making progress, Elena. Slow, painful, inadequate progress, but progress. At what cost? Everything. That's always the cost. Elena's phone rang again. She looked at the caller ID, Lieutenant General Hayes. I need to take this, she answered. General, Major Castellano, have you seen the news? Some of it. It's escalating. Fox, CNN, MSNBC, they all want interviews. The Secretary of Defense's office called. They're concerned about the optics. Concerned how? They want to control the narrative. They're proposing a joint press conference. You, Captain Drake, military leadership. Show a united front. Demonstrate that the military takes these issues seriously. Elena felt sick. They want me to stand next to Drake and pretend everything's fine. They want to show that the situation was handled appropriately and everyone's moving forward. That's a lie, General. Everything's not fine. Drake spent an entire evening harassing me. He got a slap on the wrist and some counseling. That's not accountability. Major, I understand your frustration. Have you ever been questioned about your service by someone half your age and twice as arrogant? Have you been told you're lying about your combat record? Have you gotten death threats because you dared to defend yourself? Silence on the line. Then quietly, no, I haven't. Then you don't understand, and neither do they. What do you want me to tell the Secretary's office? Tell them I'm not interested in photo ops. If they want me to speak publicly, I'll speak the truth. All of it, including the fact that Drake is one symptom of a much bigger disease. That's going to make people uncomfortable. Good. They should be uncomfortable. I've been uncomfortable my entire career. Another pause. The job offer I mentioned, it's still on the table. In fact, given current circumstances, it's more important than ever. We need your voice, Major. My voice seems to be causing problems. Your voice is exposing problems that already existed. There's a difference. Elena looked at the table of women waiting for her, all of them warriors who'd fought their own battles and bore their own scars. General, can I call you back? Of course, but Elena, don't disappear. Too many people are counting on you. The call ended. Elena returned to the table and sat heavily. Pentagon wants me to do a press conference with Drake, show that everything's resolved. Are you going to do it? Rita asked. No, I'm going to tell the truth instead. The women smiled hard, knowing smiles that came from years of fighting battles no one else could see. "Welcome to the resistance," Christine said. "It sucks, you'll hate it, and you'll never be able to walk away." Sounds terrible. It is, but you're not alone. They spent the next 2 hours strategizing. Christine had media contacts. Jennifer knew lawyers who specialized in military harassment cases. Rita had connections in Congress. Together, they mapped out a plan not for a sanitized press conference, but for real accountability. Elena felt something shift inside her. Not hope exactly, but determination. The same determination that had kept her in the cockpit over the Korangal Valley when every instinct screamed to retreat. When dinner ended, they exchanged numbers and promised to stay in touch. As Elena walked to her car, Sarah caught up with her. "You okay?" "I don't know yet. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing." "The right thing usually feels better than this." "No, it doesn't. The right thing usually feels terrible, right up until the moment you look back and realize you couldn't have lived with yourself if you'd done anything else." Elena drove home through dark streets, her mind spinning. When she arrived, there was a package on her doorstep. No return address. Her stomach clenched. Had the death threats escalated to physical intimidation? She called the police before opening it. They sent an officer who checked it carefully. Inside was a worn combat boot size small with a note. "You walked so we could run. Thank you, Iron Lady. From the 1st All-Female Army Ranger class." Elena's knees went weak. The officer steadied her. "Ma'am, you okay?" "Yeah, I'm okay." She wasn't okay. She was overwhelmed and terrified and angry and proud all at once. But she was still standing. That night she drafted a statement. Not for the Pentagon's press conference. For herself. She posted it on her mostly ignored Twitter account at 2 a.m. when she couldn't sleep. "My name is Elena Castellano. My call sign was Iron Lady. I served 28 years in the United States Air Force as a combat pilot. I flew 247 missions. I saved lives. I lost friends. I bled for this country. And last week, a young officer questioned whether I served at all because I'm a woman." This is not about one man. This is about a system that still doesn't fully accept women as warriors. I'm tired of fighting this battle. But I'll fight it anyway because the women coming after me deserve better. They deserve to be believed, to be respected, to serve without constantly proving they have the right to exist. If my story makes you uncomfortable, good. Sit with that discomfort. Ask yourself why you assumed I was lying, why you assumed standards were lowered, why you assumed I didn't belong. I'm done making myself smaller to make you comfortable. Iron Lady is speaking. Are you listening? She hit post before she could second-guess herself. Then she turned off her phone and tried to sleep. When she woke up 6 hours later, the tweet had 847,000 likes and 129,000 retweets. Her phone had 264 missed calls and over 1,000 text messages. The story had exploded beyond anything she'd imagined. News outlets were calling. Veterans organizations wanted statements. Women's groups wanted her to speak at rallies. The backlash was immediate, and vicious men calling her every name imaginable, questioning her service, her sanity, her worth as a human being. But there were other messages too, from women who'd served, women who'd been doubted, women who'd quit because the fight became too exhausting, women who stayed because they were too stubborn to let the bastards win. "You spoke for all of us," one message read. "Thank you for being brave when we couldn't be." Another, "My daughter wants to join the Air Force. I was going to talk her out of it. Now I'm going to show her your story and tell her she can be anything she wants." And one more from a phone number Elena recognized. David Torres's mother. "My son always said you were the toughest pilot he ever flew with. He was right. Thank you for keeping his memory alive by refusing to be silenced." Elena sat on her bed, surrounded by messages, and cried. Not from sadness or fear or regret, but from relief. She'd been carrying these stories for decades, locked inside where no one could see them. Now they were out, exposed, real. She couldn't take them back. She could only move forward. Her doorbell rang. Elena answered it to find Rachel standing there, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, They hugged, holding each other like lifelines. I read your tweet, Rachel said. I'm so proud of you. I don't know what I've done. I might have just ended any chance of a peaceful retirement. You told the truth. That's what warriors do. I'm tired of being a warrior, Rachel. I know, Mom, but you're too good at it to stop now. They spent the day together, Rachel running interference on phone calls and messages, while Elena tried to process what was happening. General Hayes called again. Major, you've created quite a situation. I didn't mean to. Yes, you did. And I'm glad you did. The secretary wants to meet with you. No press conference. Just a conversation. He wants to hear directly from you about what needs to change. Will anything actually change? I don't know. But if you don't try, I guarantee nothing will. Elena agreed to the meeting. It was scheduled for the following week at the Pentagon. She'd walk into that building, the heart of military power, and tell them everything they didn't want to hear. She was terrified, exhausted, angry. But she was also, for the first time in years, hopeful. Not because she believed one meeting would fix everything, but because she'd stopped trying to fix things quietly, carefully, without disturbing anyone. She'd stopped being small. She'd stopped performing. She'd stopped protecting the feelings of people who'd never protected hers. Iron Lady wasn't just a call sign anymore. It was a promise, a warning, a declaration that she would not be erased, silenced, or dismissed. And if that made people uncomfortable, they could sit with their discomfort. She'd sat with hers for 28 years. They could handle a few days. Retry TS Part 4, Louis Viet 4910 năm center to liên kết liên mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện pha hội thoại tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liền mạch với phần trước không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới. Liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch. Sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề. Tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề, phụ phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ Hoa Kỳ. Giống văn giàu cảm xúc chân thực và gần gũi, không mô tả cảnh, tập trung vào hành động, cảm xúc và tâm lý nhân vật. Việt phần 4, đạt điểm 10/10 và bổ sung tiết tấu câu chuyện nhanh, sửa lỗi AI kể theo ngôi thứ 3, tăng độ kịch tính, không viết lan man, kết thúc phần không giới thiệu phần sau. Lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn không nhảy sang mục document mới. 2-3 phút cần có mini climax và đặt 10-15 mini climax mỗi phần cứ. 10-12 phút có một twist lớn sâu sắc, đạn xem mini cliffhanger mạnh hơn, tăng tính tự nhiên cho phản ứng của các nhân vật, thêm nhịp điệu, kịch tính thực tế và gần gũi. 18-10 phút cần có móc giữ chân khán giả. Lưu ý không mô tả cảnh và chỉ cần viết nội dung và viết đúng link nha. Show more 3 Thra Part 4, The Testimony. The Pentagon was exactly as Elena remembered, imposing, bureaucratic, filled with people who thought they controlled the world because they controlled the paperwork. She'd been here twice before in her career, both times for award ceremonies, where she smiled politely and said the right things while men took credit for her work. This time would be different. Rachel insisted on coming. You're not walking in there alone, Mom. I've been alone before. Not anymore. They passed through security at 08:30. Elena wore her service dress uniform, all her medals, all her ribbons, every piece of evidence that she'd earned her place in that building. The security guard checking IDs did a double take. Ma'am, you're Iron Lady. That's what they called me. My sister serves. She showed me your tweet. What you said, it mattered. Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. Every interaction now carried weight she hadn't asked for. General Hayes met them in the lobby. She was younger than Elena expected, maybe 45, with sharp eyes and a handshake like a vice grip. Major Castellano, thank you for coming. Hayes glanced at Rachel. And you are Captain Rachel Castellano, Air Force, also her daughter. Hayes smiled slightly. The pilot gene runs in the family. Among other things, Rachel said coolly. They walked through corridors that smelled like floor polish and power. Junior officers scurried past, barely glancing at them. Elena wondered how many knew who she was, how many had read her tweet, how many secretly agreed but would never say so out loud. The secretary is running a few minutes behind, Hayes said. There's been a development. Elena's stomach dropped. What kind of development? Captain Drake gave an interview this morning to CNN. He did what? He violated his direct orders. He was specifically told not to speak publicly about the incident. Rachel grabbed Elena's arm. What did he say? Hayes hesitated. He defended you. Completely. He called himself a coward and admitted he harassed you because he felt threatened by your accomplishments. He said the military has a systemic problem with how it treats women, and that he's been part of that problem. Elena stopped walking. He actually said that verbatim. Then he announced he's requesting to be removed from his current position and reassigned to work with veteran support organizations. He said if the Marine Corps won't make him face consequences, he'll face them himself. Jesus, Rachel whispered. It's created chaos, Hayes continued. Conservative media is calling him a traitor. Progressive outlets are hailing him as an example of accountability. And the Marine Corps is scrambling because one of their captains just admitted on national television that there's a culture problem. Elena felt dizzy. I told him to learn. I didn't tell him to commit career suicide. He's 27 years old. His career will recover, but right now, he's the story. You're the story, and the secretary needs to respond. They reached a conference room. Inside sat 5 people, the Secretary of Defense, 2 assistant secretaries, the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, and someone Elena didn't recognize in civilian clothes. The secretary stood. He was in his 60s, gray-haired, with the particular expression of a man who'd spent his career managing problems he didn't create. Major Castellano, thank you for coming. He gestured to chairs. Please sit. Elena and Rachel sat. Hayes remained standing by the door. I'm going to be direct, the secretary said. Your tweet has created significant challenges for this department. We're receiving inquiries from Congress media veteran organizations. Everyone wants to know what we're doing about the issues you raised. What are you doing? Elena asked. That's why you're here. We need to understand the full scope of the problem. The full scope? I can give you the full scope in one sentence. Women in the military are constantly questioned, undermined, and treated as lesser than their male counterparts, regardless of their qualifications or accomplishments. There. That's the scope. The Chief of Staff, a 4-star general, leaned forward. Major, surely you understand it's more complex than that. Why? Because acknowledging it would require actually changing things. Because making sweeping generalizations doesn't help us identify specific, actionable solutions. Elena felt her temper rising. General, I flew combat missions for 8 years. I saved lives. I was shot at, injured, and watched my wingman die. And last week, a captain half my age accused me of lying about all of it because I'm a woman. That's not a generalization. That's a Tuesday. Rachel spoke up. I'm currently serving. I'm a helicopter pilot. My unit calls me Princess. They give me the easiest assignments because they don't trust me with the dangerous ones. When I complain, I'm told I'm being oversensitive. When I outperform them, they say I must have had help. This isn't ancient history. This is happening right now. The civilian spoke for the first time. I'm Dr. Sarah Mitchell. I'm a consultant brought in to conduct an independent review of gender integration in the military. Her voice was measured academic. I've interviewed over 300 women across all branches. Their experiences align precisely with what you're describing. Then why are we still having this conversation? Elena demanded. If you already know there's a problem, why do I need to be here convincing you? Because knowing there's a problem and having the political capital to fix it are 2 different things, the secretary said bluntly. I need ammunition. I need stories. I need evidence that will convince Congress to fund reforms and convince commanders to change their cultures. You need me to bleed publicly so you can get your budget increase. I need you to help me help the next generation of women who serve. Elena stared at him, trying to determine if he was sincere or just politically savvy. Probably both. What exactly do you want from me? Testify before Congress. Tell your story. Make them understand that this isn't about political correctness or social engineering. It's about utilizing our best people regardless of gender. And if I say no, then we'll do what we can with what we have, but it won't be enough. It's never enough without a face, a story, a hero. I'm not a hero. You saved 19 Marines in the Korangal Valley. What would you call that? My job. Dr. Mitchell interjected. May I ask why you're reluctant to testify? You've already gone public. You've already faced backlash. Why not take the next step? Elena turned to her. Because every time I tell my story, I have to relive it. Every mission, every close call, every friend I lost. And then I have to watch people decide whether I'm telling the truth based on their preconceptions about what women can do. I'm exhausted from performing my trauma for people who still might not believe me. The room fell silent. Rachel's hand found Elena's under the table. Squeezed. The secretary spoke quietly. I can't promise that testifying will be easy. I can't promise everyone will believe you. But I can promise that your testimony will be entered into the congressional record. It will become part of the official history, and it will give cover to every commander who wants to do better, but doesn't know how to justify it to their superior officers. Is that supposed to convince me? No. But maybe this will. If you don't testify, someone else will. Someone with less credibility, less experience, less ability to withstand the scrutiny. And they might not survive it. Elena closed her eyes. He'd found her weakness, the inability to let someone else take fire when she could take it herself. When's the hearing? 2 weeks. House Armed Services Committee. I want my lawyer present. Of course. I want to review the questions in advance. That's not typically. I don't care what's typical. I'm not walking in there blind. The secretary exchanged glances with his staff. We'll see what we can arrange. And I want Drake there. Everyone stared at her. Excuse me, the chief of staff said. If I'm testifying about the problem, he should testify about being part of the problem and choosing to change. One story about harassment is anecdotal. 2 stories that intersect show a pattern. Hayes spoke from the doorway. The Marine Corps will never allow that. It makes them look terrible. They already look terrible, Rachel said. Drake's interview made sure of that. The secretary rubbed his temples. Let me make some calls. I can't promise anything. Then I can't promise I'll testify. It was a bluff, mostly. Elena had already decided she'd do it, but she needed them to understand she wasn't a puppet they could control. Fair enough, the secretary said. We'll be in touch. The meeting ended. As they walked out, Rachel was practically vibrating with tension. Mom, that was incredible. You basically told the Secretary of Defense to go to hell. I told him my conditions. There's a difference. Still, that took guts. Or stupidity. I'm not sure which yet. Hayes caught up with them in the parking lot. Major, a word. Rachel squeezed Elena's hand and stepped away. Hayes waited until she was out of earshot. That was either brilliant or career-ending, Hayes said. I'm retired. I don't have a career to end. You will if you take the job I offered. But that offer depends on you maintaining a positive relationship with senior leadership. Elena laughed harshly. So I should shut up and be grateful. I'm saying there's a difference between speaking truth to power and alienating the people who can actually implement change. General, with all due respect, I spent 28 years carefully managing how I spoke to power. I calibrated every word, modulated every emotion, made myself palatable to men who barely tolerated my presence. And you know what that got me? A retirement and a viral confrontation that never should have happened because the culture never changed. So now you're going to burn bridges. I'm going to stop building bridges on my back. If they want change, they can meet me halfway. Hayes studied her for a long moment. You remind me of myself 20 years ago, angry, righteous, convinced I could force the system to change through sheer force of will. What happened? I learned that systems change slowly, that you have to work within them to transform them, that being right isn't enough, you have to be strategic. And did it work? Did you change things? Hayes hesitated. Some things, not enough. Then maybe it's time for a different approach. Or maybe it's time to recognize that perfect is the enemy of good. Small changes compound over time, Major. You're so focused on revolutionary transformation that you might miss the incremental progress right in front of you. Elena wanted to argue, but Hayes had a point. How many small victories had she dismissed because they weren't complete victories? How many allies had she alienated because they weren't perfect allies? I'll think about what you said, Elena conceded. That's all I ask. And Major, for what it's worth, I hope you do testify. Your voice matters. Just remember that anger without strategy is just noise. Hayes left. Rachel returned. What was that about? Career advice I probably won't take. They drove back to Elena's house in silence. Inside, Elena's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages from reporters, veterans, politicians, strangers, all wanting pieces of her story, her time, her energy. Rachel ordered pizza while Elena tried to process the day. When the food arrived, they ate in Elena's living room, like they had when Rachel was a teenager and the world made sense. Mom, can I ask you something? Always. Do you regret it? Your service. Elena thought about it. I regret what it cost. I don't regret what it taught me. What did it teach you? That I'm stronger than I thought, weaker than I wanted to be. That courage and fear aren't opposites, they're partners. That saving lives doesn't erase taking lives. That being right doesn't guarantee being heard. That's depressing. That's honest. Rachel set down her pizza. I'm thinking about getting out. After this deployment, maybe not re-enlisting. Elena's heart clenched. Because of how they treat you. Partly, but also because I don't know if I can fight for 28 years like you did. I'm already exhausted after 6. Then get out. There's no shame in that. Isn't there? Don't I owe it to the women coming after me to stay to fight to prove we belong? No. You owe it to yourself to be happy, to be healthy, to live a life that doesn't break you. But you stayed, even when it broke you. Elena looked at her daughter, this fierce, brilliant woman she'd raised while deploying to war zones and working twice as hard as her male colleagues. Rachel, I stayed because I didn't know how to leave. Because flying was the only thing I was good at. Because admitting the cost was too high felt like admitting defeat. Elena's voice cracked. Don't be like me. Be smarter than me. Know when to walk away. What if I testify with you? What if I tell them what's happening now? Not just what happened then. Absolutely not. Why? Because you're still in. You still have to work with these people, live on these bases, rely on these commanders. I can afford to burn bridges. You can't. So I should just stay quiet, let you fight alone. Yes, because that's what mothers do. We take the hits so our daughters don't have to. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. That's not fair to you. Fair doesn't matter. You matter. They held each other crying for different reasons, but the same cause. The impossible weight of being a woman who refuses to accept limitations others place on you. The next morning, Elena woke to her doorbell ringing insistently. She answered it in her bathrobe to find Captain Drake standing on her porch. He looked terrible, exhausted, pale like he hadn't slept in days. Major Castellano, I'm sorry to show up unannounced. What are you doing here, Captain? I needed to apologize, in person. The conversation we had with Colonel Morrison, it wasn't enough. And the interview I did, that wasn't about you. That was about me trying to fix my own reputation. Elena stared at him. You gave that interview without my permission. You involved me in your redemption arc without asking if I wanted to be involved. I know. I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking about you. I was thinking about myself. Again. Drake's voice shook. Major, I've spent the last week reading everything I could find about women in combat. The statistics, the stories, the reports. And I realized I'm not the hero of my own story. I'm the villain in yours. You're being dramatic. No, I'm being honest for maybe the first time in my life. I built my entire identity on being a warrior, a Marine, a leader. But I was leading by tearing others down. That's not leadership. That's cowardice. Elena stepped aside. Come in. You look like hell. Drake followed her inside. She made coffee while he sat at her kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug like he was trying to hold himself together. The Marine Corps wants to court-martial me, he said quietly. For the interview. For violating orders. For bringing discredit upon the service. for making them look bad on national television. What will you do? Accept it, face the consequences. It's the least I deserve. Elena sat across from him. That's stupid. Drake looked up surprised. Listen to me, Captain. A court-martial will end your career. It'll follow you forever. You made mistakes, serious ones, but you also did something remarkable. You admitted them. You took responsibility. Don't let them destroy you for that. Why do you care what happens to me? Because I remember being 27 and making mistakes and being terrified that one error would define my entire life. Because I've seen good people crushed by systems that demand perfection. Because despite everything, I believe you can still do good in this world. Drake's face crumpled. I don't deserve your compassion. Probably not. But I'm giving it anyway because that's what humans do. We offer grace, even when it's hard. What should I do? Fight the court-martial, get a lawyer, tell your story, explain that you're trying to be better, and the military should encourage that, not punish it. And if I lose, then you start over. There are worse things than starting over. Drake nodded slowly. The Secretary of Defense's office contacted me. They want me to testify before Congress, with you. I know. I suggested it. Why would you do that? Because your story matters too. Because showing that people can change is as important as showing that change is necessary. Will you really testify? Yes. Will you? Drake met her eyes. If you're willing to stand next to me after everything I did, the least I can do is stand next to you and admit I was wrong. They talked for another hour, mapping out what testimony might look like. When Drake finally left, Elena felt something she hadn't expected: hope. Not naive hope that everything would magically improve, but realistic hope that maybe, possibly incrementally, things could get better. The phone rang. Jennifer Walsh from the veteran dinner. Elena, have you seen the news? No, why? Turn on CNN. Elena grabbed the remote. The headline read, Pentagon announces independent review of gender integration following Iron Lady controversy. The Secretary of Defense was speaking at a press conference. Cannot ignore the concerns raised by Major Castellano and countless other women who have served with distinction. We are committed to creating an environment where all service members can thrive based on merit and capability, not gender. Elena watched stunned as he announced a comprehensive review, new training protocols, updated harassment reporting procedures, and a commitment to testifying before Congress about needed reforms. Holy shit, Elena whispered. They're listening, Jennifer said. You made them listen. We made them listen. All of us. Maybe, but you were the match that lit the fire. That night, Elena sat down and began writing her congressional testimony. Not the sanitized version they probably expected. Not the carefully worded political statement that would offend no one and change nothing. The truth. Raw and uncomfortable and necessary. She wrote about the Korengal Valley, about losing David Torres, about every mission where she'd proven herself and still been doubted, about the cost of being Iron Lady when she just wanted to be Elena. She wrote about the women like Rachel who were still fighting, about the girls who'd never enlist because they'd heard too many stories like hers, about the men like Drake who could change if given the chance. She wrote until her hands cramped and her eyes burned, and she'd said everything she needed to say. Then she saved the document, titled it Testimony, and sent it to her lawyer for review. Tomorrow, she'd call General Hayes and accept the job offer. She'd work within the system to change it, even though part of her wanted to burn it all down. Because Hayes was right, perfect was the enemy of good, and good was worth fighting for. Iron Lady wasn't done fighting yet. She was just getting started. Retry TS Part 5 lưu ý Việt 9000 tập nhấn trong sâm từ liên kết liền mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện pha hội thoại, tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liền mạch với phần trước không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới. Liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch. Sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề. Tránh ngắt quãng, đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề, phụ phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ Hoa Kỳ, giống văn giàu, cảm xúc chân thực và gần gũi, không mô tả cảnh, tập trung vào hành động, cảm xúc và tâm lý nhân vật.
Viết phần 5, đặt điểm 10/10 và bổ sung tiết tấu câu chuyện nhanh sửa lời AI. Kể theo ngôi thứ 3 giữ độ kịch tính không viết lan man. Kết thúc dùng câu khẳng định mạnh để khép lại câu chuyện rõ ràng, trọn vẹn.
Lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn không nhảy sang mức document mới. 2-3 phút cần có mini climax và đặt 10-15 mini climax mỗi phần cử. 10-12 phút có một twist lớn sâu sắc đan xen, mini cliffhanger mạnh hơn. Tăng tính tự nhiên cho phản ứng của các nhân vật thêm nhịp điệu, kịch tính thực tế và gần gũi. 8-10 phút cần có móc giữ chân khán giả. Lưu ý không mô tả cảnh và chỉ cần viết nội dung và viết đúng lên nhé. Show more. Part Mime. The Breakthrough. The congressional hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning at 0900. Elena spent the night before in a D.C. hotel room, unable to sleep, reviewing her testimony until the words blurred together. Rachel had flown in from her base. Sarah Christine and the other women from dinner had driven up to be in the gallery. Even First Sergeant Webb had taken leave to attend. At 0300, Elena gave up on sleep and called the front desk for coffee. At 04:15, her phone rang. Drake. Major, I can't do this. Elena closed her eyes. Yes, you can. I'm going to walk in there and tell the entire country I harassed a decorated veteran. My career is over. My family will be humiliated. I'll be the poster child for everything wrong with the military. Or you'll be the example that change is possible, that accountability matters, that good people can make terrible mistakes and learn from them. What if they don't see it that way? Then they don't, but you'll know you told the truth. That has to be enough. Silence on the line. Then quietly, thank you for believing I could be better. Thank you for trying to be better. At 0730, Elena put on her uniform. Every ribbon perfectly aligned, every medal polished. She looked in the mirror and saw not just herself, but every woman who'd worn the uniform and been told they didn't belong. The hearing room was packed, cameras everywhere, representatives seated in rows looking down from their elevated positions. Elena recognized a few faces from news coverage, some allies, some adversaries, all politicians first and everything else second. General Hayes met her outside the chamber. Ready? No. Good. If you were ready, you wouldn't be nervous. Nervous means you care. Drake arrived looking like he was walking to his execution. His marine dress blues were immaculate, but his hands shook as he clutched his written statement. Major, he said. Captain. I'm terrified. Me too. You don't look terrified. I've had more practice hiding it. They were called in together. The gallery erupted in whispers as they entered Iron Lady and the captain who'd harassed her side by side. Some people understood. Others looked confused. A few looked angry that Elena would share a platform with him. The committee chairman, a congressman from Texas with too much hair gel and too little empathy, banged his gavel. This hearing will come to order. We're here today to examine issues of gender integration and harassment in the United States military. Our first witnesses are Major Elena Castellano, United States Air Force retired, and Captain James Drake, United States Marine Corps. They were sworn in. Elena's hand trembled slightly as she raised it. Major Castellano, you may begin with your opening statement. Elena looked at the microphone, at the cameras, at the representatives who would decide whether her words mattered. Then she looked at the gallery and found Rachel, found Sarah, found Webb. She began to speak. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Elena Castellano. I served 28 years in the United States Air Force as a combat pilot. I flew the F-15E Strike Eagle. I logged 247 combat missions and won 843 combat hours. I was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, the Air Medal, with Valor Device and the Purple Heart. Her voice was steady, now strengthened by the truth. I didn't come here to brag about my service. I came here because 2 weeks ago I attended a veterans reunion where a young Marine captain spent an entire evening questioning whether I'd actually served, whether I'd actually seen combat, whether I'd actually earned the right to call myself a veteran. He suggested I was committing stolen valor. He mocked my call sign. He demanded proof of my service in front of dozens of witnesses. She could see some representatives shifting uncomfortably. That captain is sitting next to me. His name is Captain James Drake. And before you judge him too harshly, I want you to understand something. He's not a monster. He's not uniquely terrible. He's a product of a military culture that still in 2025 questions whether women belong in combat roles despite decades of evidence that we do. Elena paused, letting that sink in. Captain Drake learned his attitudes from somewhere, from commanders who made jokes about female service members, from training that presented women as distractions or liabilities, from a promotion system that rewards aggressive masculinity and punishes anything perceived as weakness. He learned that the way you prove you're a warrior is by diminishing other people's service. A representative from California, a woman, leaned forward. "Major, are you excusing his behavior?" "No, ma'am. I'm explaining it. Because if we don't understand how these attitudes form, we can't prevent them in the next generation." The chairman interrupted. "Major, some critics have suggested you're exaggerating the problem, that your experience with Captain Drake was an isolated incident." Elena's jaw tightened. "Sir, with all due respect, the fact that you think it's isolated proves you haven't been listening to women in the military. This happens every single day, to women across all branches, all ranks, all specialties." She pulled out a folder. "I brought documentation. 347 testimonies from women who've served in the last 20 years. Every single one describes similar experiences: being questioned, being undermined, being forced to prove their worth over and over, while their male counterparts are given the benefit of the doubt." She slid the folder to the committee clerk. "These are not isolated incidents. This is systemic." A conservative representative from Alabama spoke up, his voice dripping with skepticism. "Major, the military has been integrated for decades. Women have had equal opportunities. At what point does personal responsibility come into play? At what point do we stop blaming the system and start acknowledging that some women simply can't handle the pressure?" The gallery erupted. The chairman banged his gavel. Elena waited for silence. When she spoke, her voice was ice. "Congressman, I flew combat missions over some of the most hostile territory in Afghanistan. I provided close air support for ground troops and firefights. I landed my aircraft with shrapnel in my shoulder and fuel leaking from my tank. I watched my wingman die because he drew enemy fire away from my damaged plane. So when you ask me about handling pressure, I want you to think very carefully about whether you could do what I did." The congressman's face reddened. "But to answer your question, yes, personal responsibility matters. That's why Captain Drake is here. To take personal responsibility for his actions. To show that when we fail, we can admit it, learn from it, and do better. Can you say the same, Congressman? Can you admit when you failed the women who serve?" The room went completely silent. The chairman cleared his throat. "Captain Drake, you may give your statement." Drake's hands shook as he pulled out his papers. He looked at Elena. She gave him a small nod. He began reading, his voice barely audible at first. "Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm here today to admit that I harassed Major Castellano. I questioned her service. I implied she was lying. I created a hostile environment. And I did all of this because I felt threatened by her accomplishments." His voice grew stronger. "I'm not here to make excuses, but I am here to explain how I became the person who could do something so disgraceful. I joined the Marine Corps at 18. From day one, I was taught that being a Marine meant being tough, aggressive, dominant. I was taught that weakness was the enemy. And I was taught, not explicitly, but through 1,000 small messages, that women were weak." A few representatives leaned forward, actually listening. "When I saw Major Castellano at that reunion, I couldn't reconcile her presence with my understanding of what a warrior should be. So I decided she must be lying. It was easier than admitting my understanding was wrong." Drake set down his papers, speaking from the heart now. "After that night, after I learned who she really was, I had a choice. I could deny, deflect, minimize. Or I could face what I'd done and try to be better. I chose better. I'm here today because the military needs to do the same thing, face what it's done, and choose better." The California representative spoke again. "Captain, what consequences have you faced for your actions?" "I've been formally reprimanded. I'm likely facing a court-martial for giving an unauthorized interview. My career is probably over. Do you think that's fair? Drake looked at Elena. I think it's less than Major Castellano endured for 28 years while serving her country with distinction. So yes, it's fair. The hearing continued for 3 more hours. Representatives asked questions ranging from thoughtful to hostile. Elena answered each one with facts, with passion, with the accumulated weight of nearly 3 decades in uniform. When asked about solutions, she didn't hold back. Zero tolerance for harassment. Real consequences for offenders, not slaps on the wrist. Mandatory training that's actually effective, not just checking boxes. Promotion boards that value diverse leadership styles, not just aggressive ones. And most importantly, believe women when they report problems. Don't make us prove we're telling the truth. A moderate Republican from Ohio asked the question Elena had been waiting for. Major, if the military is as broken as you say, why should women join at all? Why would you encourage your daughter to serve? Elena thought about Rachel sitting in the gallery, about all the young women watching this hearing. Because despite everything, service matters. Because defending your country is worth doing even when it's hard. Because the women who serve now are making it easier for the women who come after. And because I still believe I have to believe that we can fix this. Her voice caught slightly. I love the military. I loved flying. I loved the mission. I loved serving alongside people who'd run toward danger to save strangers. But loving something doesn't mean pretending it's perfect. Sometimes love means demanding better. The hearing finally adjourned. Elena and Drake were immediately swarmed by reporters shouting questions. Security had to clear a path for them to exit. Outside the chamber, Elena collapsed into a chair. Rachel appeared with water. Mom, you were incredible. I was terrified. You didn't show it. That's the Iron Lady training. Drake approached hesitantly. Major, thank you for letting me testify with you, for giving me a chance to make this right. You made it right yourself, Captain. I just gave you the opportunity. What happens now? Now we wait. We see if they listened, if they'll actually change things. And if they don't, Elena stood straightening her uniform, then we keep fighting, because that's what we do. The next week, the committee released its recommendations, sweeping reforms, new policies, increased funding for harassment prevention, mandatory training overhaul, independent oversight of equal opportunity complaints. It wasn't everything Elena wanted, but it was something, a start. The week after that, General Hayes called with an update on Elena's job offer. The position has been approved. You'd start next month, but there's a twist. What kind of twist? They want you to run the entire program, not just women's integration, all diversity and inclusion efforts across the Department of Defense. It's a bigger job than we originally discussed. How much bigger? Deputy Assistant Secretary level. You'd report directly to the Secretary of Defense. Elena sat down. That's not a contractor position. No, it's a political appointment. Senate confirmation required. Full benefits, significant budget, actual authority to implement changes. I'd be back in the system, back in the fight full-time. Yes. Is that something you want? Elena thought about Rachel, about Sarah and Christine and all the other women still serving, about the girls who'd never enlist if things didn't change, about Drake and the men like him who could learn if someone taught them. Yes, she said, that's something I want. The confirmation hearings were brutal. Conservative senators questioned her credentials, her temperament, her tweet that had started everything. Progressive senators used her as a cudgel to attack their opponents. Everyone had an agenda. But Elena had endured worse. She'd faced enemy fire. She'd buried friends. She'd spent 28 years proving herself to people who didn't want to be convinced. A few senators asking tough questions. That was Tuesday. She was confirmed by a vote of 58 to 42. Not overwhelming, but enough. On her first day in the new position, Elena walked into the Pentagon wearing a civilian suit instead of a uniform. It felt strange. Wrong, almost. But also like a new beginning. Her office was small but functional. On her desk, someone had placed a gift, the combat boot from the all-female ranger class, now mounted on a plaque with an inscription, "You walked so we could run." Elena traced the worn leather with her finger and allowed herself a moment of pride. Her assistant knocked. "Ma'am, your 900 is here." "Send them in." Captain Drake entered now in civilian clothes. His court-martial had been dismissed after his congressional testimony. The Marine Corps, facing public pressure, had quietly reassigned him to a training position instead. "Captain Drake, I didn't know you were on my schedule. I requested the meeting. I wanted to ask if you had any positions available. I'm transitioning out of active duty. I thought maybe I could help with your work here." Elena studied him. "You want to work for me?" "I want to work with you, to help fix the problems I was part of creating." "That's going to be hard work. Uncomfortable work. You'll face criticism from both sides, people who think you're a traitor and people who think you don't deserve redemption." "I know. But Major Castellano once told me that sometimes love means demanding better. I love the military. I want to demand better for it." Elena smiled. "When can you start?" 3 months into the job, Elena received an invitation to speak at the Air Force Academy graduation. She almost declined. She didn't feel like she had anything new to say. But Rachel convinced her. "Mom, you have to go. Those cadets need to hear from you, especially the women." So Elena went. She stood on that platform in front of 1,000 young people about to become officers and thought about what she wanted them to know. When she spoke, she told them the truth. You're about to enter a profession that will test everything you think you know about yourself. It will show you heights of courage you didn't know you could reach. It will show you depths of fear you didn't know existed. It will give you the best friends you'll ever have and take some of them away before their time. She paused, looking at the sea of young faces. Some of you will face challenges I never faced. Some of you will face challenges I faced every single day. You'll be doubted, questioned, underestimated, and you'll have to decide how to respond. She thought about Drake, about Morrison, about every man who'd ever questioned her. You can respond with anger. You can respond with resignation. Or you can respond by being so undeniably excellent that even your doubters have to acknowledge your worth. All three are valid. None are easy. Elena's voice strengthened. But whatever you choose, remember this: you are not fighting alone. Every woman who came before you fought to open the doors you're walking through. Every woman serving alongside you is fighting to keep those doors open. And every woman who comes after you will benefit from the battles you win today. She looked directly at the female cadets, scattered throughout the audience. Your service matters. Your voice matters. Your presence matters. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Not your classmates, not your commanders, not the voices in your own head that tell you you're not good enough. Her throat tightened. You are enough. You've always been enough. And anyone who can't see that is the one with the problem, not you. The applause was deafening. But what mattered to Elena was the young woman in the front row, crying, mouthing, "Thank you," over and over. After the ceremony, dozens of female cadets lined up to meet her, to shake her hand, to tell her that her story had inspired them to push through moments when they wanted to quit. One cadet, barely 21, with determination blazing in her eyes, said, "Ma'am, I want to be a pilot like you. Everyone says it's too hard, that I should pick something easier. What should I do?" Elena gripped her hand firmly. You fly so well they can't ignore you. And when they still try to ignore you, you fly even better. You make yourself impossible to deny. And if it's too hard, then you rest. And when you're ready, you get back in the cockpit. Because the only real failure is letting someone else define your limitations. That night, Elena video called Rachel. "How'd the speech go?" Rachel asked. "I think it went well. Hard to tell sometimes." "Mom, I made a decision." Elena's heart sank. "You're getting out." "No, I'm staying in. I'm applying to the weapons school. I'm going to become an instructor pilot." "Rachel, that's incredibly competitive." "I know, but you taught me that competitive doesn't mean impossible. And I want to be the instructor who makes it easier for the women who come after me." Elena felt tears forming. "I'm so proud of you." "I learned from the best." 6 months later, Elena's reforms were showing results. Harassment reports were being taken seriously. Training was actually changing attitudes. Women were being promoted at higher rates because bias in the evaluation system was being addressed. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was better. Drake had become one of her most effective advocates, speaking to military audiences about his experience and the importance of accountability. He faced constant criticism, but he kept showing up. Sarah Chen's Veterans Support Network had grown to chapters in 30 states. Christine Park was running for Congress on a platform of veterans' rights. Jennifer Walsh had published a book about women in combat that became a bestseller. The movement Elena had accidentally sparked was growing beyond her. 1 year after the congressional hearing, Elena received a letter. It was from a young enlisted woman she'd never met. "Major Castellano, I was about to leave the military. I couldn't take the harassment anymore, the constant feeling that I didn't belong. Then I saw your testimony. I saw you refuse to be silent. I saw you turn your pain into purpose. You gave me the courage to file a formal complaint against my harasser. The investigation took months, but he was finally removed from his position. I'm staying in. I'm fighting. Because you showed me it was possible. Thank you for being Iron Lady when I needed someone to be strong for me." Elena read the letter 3 times, then carefully filed it with the hundreds of others she'd received. That evening, she drove to Arlington National Cemetery, to David Torres's grave. She'd avoided coming here for years. The grief was too raw, the guilt too overwhelming. But now, with everything that had happened, she needed to tell him. "Hey, David, it's been a while." She sat on the grass beside his headstone. "I'm sorry I haven't visited. I was angry at you for dying, for leaving me alone, for making me be Iron Lady without you." The cemetery was quiet, except for wind in the trees. "But I understand now why you did it, why you drew that missile away from my plane. It's the same reason I stayed over the Korangal Valley when I should have retreated. The same reason I testified before Congress when I wanted to disappear. The same reason I took this job instead of retiring quietly." Elena touched his name carved in marble. "We serve something bigger than ourselves, and sometimes service requires sacrifice. You made yours. I'm still making mine, and I hope it's worth it." She sat there until sunset, talking to her friend, crying for what was lost and finding strength in what remained. When Elena finally stood to leave, she felt lighter. Not healed, you never fully heal from losing someone, but accepting, moving forward. As she walked back to her car, her phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. "Mom, I got accepted to weapons school, first female helicopter pilot in my class. Couldn't have done it without you." Elena smiled through fresh tears and typed back, "You did it yourself. I just showed you it was possible. Proud of you. Love you." Another text arrived, this one from Drake. "Just finished training a new class of lieutenants. Used your congressional testimony as a teaching tool. They got it, Major. The next generation gets it." Then one from Sarah. "Our support network just helped its 1,000th veteran. Couldn't have happened without you speaking out." Elena sat in her car reading messages from people she'd inspired, lives she'd changed, battles she'd helped win. She thought about that night at the reunion, about Drake's smirk, about feeling erased and invisible and tired of fighting. She thought about how close she'd come to staying silent, and she thought about what would have been lost if she had. No congressional testimony, no reforms, no movement, no young women finding courage in her story, no Drake learning to be better, no Rachel staying in to fight for the next generation. Silence would have been easier, safer, more comfortable. But Iron Lady had never chosen comfort over courage, and she wasn't about to start now. Elena started her car and drove home through the Washington traffic, past monuments to people who'd changed history by refusing to accept the status quo. She was one of them now. Not because she'd sought the spotlight, but because she'd spoken truth when silence would have been easier. Her phone rang one more time. An unknown number, she answered. "Major Castellano, this is Lieutenant Amanda Foster. I'm graduating from flight school next month. I'm going to fly Strike Eagles, like you did." Elena pulled over, unable to drive through sudden tears. "That's wonderful, Lieutenant. I wanted to call because when I was a kid, I saw women like you and thought maybe I could do it too. And now I am. So thank you for being brave enough to be visible. Lieutenant, you being brave enough to follow matters more than anything I did. Maybe, but you went first. That's the hardest part. After the call ended, Elena sat in her parked car and finally fully understood what it meant to be Iron Lady. It didn't mean being invulnerable. It meant being strong enough to be vulnerable in front of people who might use it against you. It didn't mean never being afraid. It meant acting despite fear. It didn't mean fighting alone. It meant fighting so others wouldn't have to fight as hard. It meant leaving the door open for everyone who came after. Elena dried her eyes, checked her mirror, and pulled back into traffic. She had work to do, policies to implement, training to oversee, a military culture to transform one difficult conversation at a time. It would take years, maybe decades, maybe her entire lifetime and beyond. But every single step forward mattered. Every policy changed. Every mind opened. Every woman who served without being questioned the way Elena had been questioned. That was the mission now. Not flying into hostile territory to save lives in immediate danger, but creating conditions where fewer lives would be in danger in the first place. Different battlefield, same commitment, same refusal to quit. Because Iron Lady didn't mean being made of metal. It meant being forged in fire and choosing to use that strength to protect others. Elena Castellano had been that pilot, that warrior, that survivor. Now she was something even more powerful, a voice that refused to be silenced, a presence that refused to be erased, and a promise to every woman in uniform that their service mattered. She'd spoken. They'd listened. And the conversation, the movement, the transformation was just beginning. Iron Lady had landed safely, but her mission was far from over.